My name is Callahan, and I was 33 years old when my parents came to Austin to steal my twins because they wanted my dead grandmother's $2.8 million estate. 27 years earlier, my mom and my dad had abandoned me on a porch when I was 6 years old and drove away while I stood there holding my tiny backpack. Now, they were sitting in a local coffee shop downtown, and my mother was faking a smile like she had been there every day for decades, whispering, "We should talk about the children, sweetie, as a family." They thought they were coming back to control my life and money. What they walked into was the one legal trap where my grandmother could still speak for herself, and what the lawyer read out loud on page 4. That part, nobody in my family saw coming, including me. Drop a comment below, tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. Tuesday, October 14th, 2025, 6:15 a.m. The morning air in Austin, Texas was always a little sticky, even in the fall. I stood in the dim light of my kitchen. My hands moved carefully, cutting the crusts off 2 peanut butter sandwiches. Thatcher and Alara, my 7-year-old twins, would be awake in 20 minutes. I wiped the jelly off the butter knife and reached for a black marker. On 2 yellow sticky notes, I drew a small smiling dinosaur for Thatcher and a flying cat for Alara. This was our normal. It was quiet. It was safe. But my eyes kept falling on the thick white envelope sitting next to the fruit bowl. The return address read, Thorne and Caldwell Law Firm, 114 Colorado Street, Austin, TX. My grandmother, Opaline, died exactly 73 days ago on August 2025. She was 84. When my parents left me on her front porch in Houston back in 1998, they said they were going on a business trip. I was 6 years old. They never came back to get me. They moved to Florida, started a new life, and sent me a cheap birthday card once a year. Grandma Opaline was the one who bought my school clothes, paid for my art supplies, and taught me how to pack a lunchbox with care. She left everything to Thatcher and Alara, her old house, her life insurance, and her savings. It came to exactly $2,800,000. She placed it all in a generation-skipping trust for the twins, and made me the sole trustee to manage it. I did not want the money, I just wanted my grandmother back. I wanted the smell of her vanilla tea and the sound of her turning the pages of her morning newspaper. The money just sat in a trust account, a heavy silent thing that I ignored, until yesterday. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text message. The screen lit up in the dark room. Sender: Blythe, morning sweetie. Your father and I are in Austin. We found a lovely hotel near downtown. We just realized it has been too long since we saw our beautiful grandchildren. Let's get coffee at 9 a.m. We have some family business to catch up on. I stared at the screen. The word sweetie made my stomach tight. In 27 years, my mother had never called me sweetie. When Thatcher and Alara were born in 2018, I sent my parents a picture. Blythe replied 3 days later, "Cute. We are very busy with the new house renovations." That was it. Now they were in Austin. I picked up the white envelope from the law firm again. I had opened it late last night. It was a formal notice of a lawsuit. My parents, Vaughn and Blythe, were suing me for full custody of my own children. In the legal papers, they claimed I was an unstable freelance artist who could not provide a proper home. They claimed they were stepping in to save their grandchildren. But I knew the truth. They did not care about Thatcher. They did not care about Alara. They cared about the $2,800,000. If they could take my kids, they could prove I was an unfit father and an unfit trustee. The court would hand them the management of the children's trust fund. I took a deep breath and set the envelope down. I could feel a cold sweat on my neck. For years I kept a careful distance from them. I never asked them for anything. When my wife passed away 4 years ago, I raised the twins completely alone. I worked late into the night, drawing book covers and magazine pages just to pay our mortgage on time. I kept the balance. I stayed quiet. I let them live their rich, showy lives in Florida. And I lived my quiet life in Texas. That was our deal. A silent rule we never spoke out loud. Now they were breaking the rule. "Daddy?" I turned around. Alara was standing in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. She was holding her favorite blue blanket. "Hey, Bug," I said softly. I walked over and picked her up. She rested her head on my shoulder. She felt so small, so warm, and so entirely mine. "Is it time for school?" she mumbled. "Almost," I whispered, holding her a little tighter than usual. "Daddy is just finishing your lunch." I looked over her shoulder, back at the phone on the counter. It buzzed again. Another message from Blythe. "We will come to your house if you don't answer. We have a right to see our family." They were using the word family like a weapon they had polished and sharpened just for this moment. I put Alara down and handed her a glass of milk. I had spent my whole life walking away from fights because Grandma Opaline always said peace was better than being right. But this morning, the peace was gone. I picked up the phone. I did not text back. Instead, I opened my contacts and found the number for Mr. Thorne, the estate lawyer. I typed a short message. "They are here. They are going for custody." I pressed send. The kitchen suddenly felt very cold. The old me, the quiet little boy they left on a porch in 1998, would have frozen in fear. But as I watched my daughter smile at the flying cat on her lunchbox, something deep inside my chest locked into place. Let them come. The Bell and Bird Coffee House on 9th Street was loud with the morning rush. I sat at a small corner table, holding a paper cup of black coffee that had gone cold. My phone was face down on the wooden table. At exactly 9 a.m., the heavy glass door opened. Blythe and Vaughn walked in. They did not look like people who were there to see their grandchildren. They looked like they were walking into a corporate board meeting. My father wore a navy blue Brooks Brothers suit. A thick silver watch flashed on his left wrist when he pushed the door. My mother wore a cream-colored silk blouse and a gold necklace. Her blonde hair was perfectly straight, without a single gray strand out of place. They spotted me. Blythe smiled. It was the same smile she used in photos, lifting the corners of her mouth while her eyes stayed perfectly still. "Callahan," she said, walking over. She did not hug me. She lightly patted my shoulder. Her perfume smelled like heavy roses and expensive department stores. "You look very comfortable today." I looked down at my faded gray sweater and plain denim jeans. "I was working early," I said softly. Vaughn pulled out a chair and sat down. He did not order a coffee. He placed his dark leather briefcase on the empty chair next to him. "It is good to see you, son," he said. His voice was smooth and practiced. "We appreciate you making the time. We know the freelance art business can be unpredictable." The word unpredictable hung in the air, a tiny, polite insult. I kept my hands wrapped around my cold coffee cup. "Why are you here, Vaughn?" "In 2004, when I was 12 years old, I fell off a bicycle and broke my left wrist. Grandma Opaline drove me to the emergency room in her old rattling Ford Taurus. The hospital bill was $850. Grandma worked at a local bakery, and that money was our food budget for 2 months. She called Vaughn from the hospital waiting room asking for a little help. He told her his money was tied up in new business investments. 3 days later, a shiny silver balloon arrived at our house with a note. "Get well soon. Love, Mom and Dad." They could not find $850 for my broken bone, but now, 21 years later, they had flown across the country for $2,800,000. "We are here because we care about our family," Blythe said. She folded her hands on the table. Her perfectly painted nails tapped against the wood. "We saw the legal notice about Opaline's passing. It is very sad, but it made us realize how hard things must be for you, Callahan. Raising twins alone? In a small 3-bedroom house? With your drawing job? That is not a life for growing children. Thatcher and Alara are happy," I said. My voice was low, but steady. "They have a good school. They have a quiet home. They need real stability," Vaughn interrupted. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a whisper. "We have a 6-bedroom house in Naples, Florida. We have the best private schools nearby. We have the resources to give them a proper future. We filed the custody petition yesterday because we want to help you, Callahan. You are grieving. You are overwhelmed. Let us take the heavy load off your shoulders." He made it sound like a favor. He made stealing my children sound like a gift. "You do not want to help me," I said, looking directly into my father's eyes. "You want to be the legal guardians of the children so you can control Grandma's estate money." Blythe gasped lightly, bringing a hand to her chest. "Callahan, how can you say something so awful? We are your parents." "You were my parents when I was 6, I replied. "You chose not to be." Vaughn's smooth smile vanished. His jaw tightened, and the polite businessman disappeared. He leaned closer, and his voice turned cold and hard. "Opaline made a mistake leaving that money under your management," Vaughn whispered. "You do not know how to manage real wealth. You will lose it all. We have the best family law attorneys in Miami and Austin. They will look at your bank statements. They will look at your wife's medical debt from 4 years ago. They will paint a picture of a struggling, unstable artist in front of a judge. You cannot win a court battle against us, Callahan. Sign the guardianship and trustee transfer papers quietly, and we will let you visit the kids on holidays." My chest felt tight, like someone was pressing a heavy stone against my ribs. They had already looked into my past. They knew about the hospital bills from when my wife Sarah was sick. They were going to use my deepest pain as a weapon in a courtroom. I stood up. I did not yell. I did not flip the table. I just looked down at the two strangers sitting in front of me. "Do not come near my house," I said quietly. "Do not come near my kids." I turned and walked out of the coffee shop into the warm Texas morning. As I unlocked my car, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message from Mr. Thorne, the estate lawyer. "Callahan, come to my office at 1 p.m. today. Bring the custody papers." I reviewed the final trust document Opaline signed in July. "There is something you need to see, something your parents do not know yet." I gripped the steering wheel, staring at the bright screen. The heavy fear in my chest slowly changed into something else, something sharp. The air conditioning inside the Thorne and Caldwell law firm was turned up too high. I sat in a heavy leather chair in room 402, staring at the thick mahogany table. The room smelled of lemon polish and old paper. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked in a slow, steady rhythm. Every tick felt like a hammer against my ribs. Mr. Silas Thorne walked in. He was a tall man in his late 60s, with kind eyes but a very strict jawline. He carried a thick brown folder. Behind him walked a younger woman in a sharp gray suit. She carried a silver laptop and looked entirely focused. "Callahan, thank you for coming so quickly," Mr. Thorne said. He sat down across from me and opened the folder. "This is Beatrix Voss. She is our firm's forensic accountant. She follows the money." Beatrix gave me a small, polite nod. "Nice to meet you, Callahan. I am sorry we have to meet under these conditions. My parents filed for emergency custody," I said. My voice sounded hollow. "They told me this morning at the coffee shop. They are going to use Sarah's medical bills against me. They are going to say I am too poor to raise Thatcher and Alara." Mr. Thorne did not look surprised. He slowly took off his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I know," Mr. Thorne said quietly. "We received the court notice at 11 a.m. But Callahan, to file a legal motion that fast, they needed inside information. They needed to know exactly how much Opaline left you, and they needed details about your house and your financial history." I frowned, confused. "But the trust is private. How could they know?" Beatrix opened her laptop. She turned the screen toward me. On the screen was a copy of an email. "Does the email address mercerhomestx@mail.com look familiar to you?" Beatrix asked. My stomach dropped. The cold air in the room suddenly felt freezing. Uncle Mercer, Blythe's younger brother. He was a local real estate agent here in Austin. When Grandma Opaline passed away in August, Mercer was the only family member who came to the funeral. He even brought a chicken casserole to my house. He sat on my couch, patted my back, and asked how I was going to manage the property taxes alone. He was not checking on my feelings. He was doing an inventory. "Mercer," I whispered. My hands started to shake. "He asked for my bank statements last month. He said he wanted to help me apply for a property tax reduction because I am a single father. He used those statements to build a profile for your parents," Beatrix explained softly. "He has been feeding them information for 2 months. We pulled the public property records this morning. Your parents signed a contract with Mercer's real estate agency last week. If they get custody of your kids, they get control of Opaline's house. Mercer gets a 6% commission for selling it." I closed my eyes. The betrayal felt like a physical weight. My own uncle, sitting at my kitchen table, eating dinner with my children, while secretly planning to take them away from me for a real estate commission. They were all in on it, the silent enablers. They smiled at me while digging a trap under my feet. "They think I am weak," I said, looking down at my hands. "They think because I am quiet, I will just give up." "That is exactly what they think," Mr. Thorne said. He leaned forward and placed a single piece of heavy paper on the table. "But Opaline knew that too. Your grandmother was a very quiet woman, Callahan, but she was not blind. She knew exactly who her daughter was, and she knew what your parents would do to you when she died." I looked at the paper. It was a page from Opaline's trust document. "When Opaline updated her will in July, Mr. Thorne continued, tracing a line of text with his pen. "She did not just leave you $2,800,000. She placed the money in a very specific type of legal structure. It is called a spendthrift trust with an independent trust protector clause." I looked at him, not understanding. "What does that mean?" "It means," Beatrix chimed in, pointing to a highlighted section on the paper, "that the $2,800,000 is locked in a corporate shell account. You receive a monthly allowance to take care of the kids. But if anyone, specifically blood relatives, attempts to sue you for custody or challenge the estate, Clause 4B activates. What is Clause 4B? I asked, my heart beating faster. Mr. Thorne gave a very small, sharp smile. If they take you to court, the financial control of the $2,800,000 is instantly transferred from you to a corporate bank. If your parents win custody, they still get zero cash. The bank will only pay direct bills, like school tuition or hospital fees, directly to the institutions. The money becomes completely untouchable by any guardian. But, more importantly, the clause automatically releases a separate $300,000 legal defense fund. That money goes directly to our law firm, specifically to defend you and the twins. I sat perfectly still. The grandfather clock ticked. Grandma Opaline had built a fortress around me from the grave. She knew they would come for the money. So, she made sure that the moment they attacked me, the money would disappear behind a steel door, and a legal army would be paid to fight for me. Your parents think they can bully a poor grieving artist into giving up, Beatrix said, her eyes locking onto mine. They have no idea that your grandmother just funded a multi-million-dollar legal war against them. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at Mr. Thorne. The fear that had lived in my chest all morning began to melt away. In its place, a quiet, cold focus began to take root. They wanted to play a game with my family. Okay, I said, my voice finally steady and clear. What is our first move? In the real world, Mr. Thorne said, folding his hands on the mahogany table. Courts do not care about hurt feelings. Judges care about dates, documents, and paper trails. Your parents filed an emergency motion for temporary custody this morning. The hearing is scheduled for November 12. We have exactly 29 days to prove they are filing in bad faith. Beatrix, the forensic accountant, typed quickly on her silver laptop. We know Uncle Mercer is feeding them your financial details. His real estate agency stands to make about $51,000 in commission if your parents get control and sell Opaline's house. But we need hard proof that Mercer and your parents are working together to steal the estate. We need to catch them talking. How? I asked. My voice was quiet in the large room. I know how to catch him, I said, looking at the screen. I can give Mercer a piece of fake information, something so valuable that he will immediately run and tell your mother. Beatrix looked at Mr. Thorne. Mr. Thorne nodded slowly. As your lawyers, we cannot legally advise you to set a trap, Mr. Thorne said carefully. But if you choose to send an email, Beatrix can put a hidden tracking pixel in it to monitor if your confidential information is being illegally leaked to your mother. If your parents use that leaked information in their official court documents next week, they will trap themselves. It felt cold and calculated, but they had forced me into this corner. I agreed. The Texas sun was blinding as I sat in the car pickup line at Zilker Elementary School. The dashboard of my old Honda felt warm under my hands. I watched the heavy glass doors of the school open. Alara and Thatcher walked out side by side. Alara was holding a piece of green construction paper covered in wet glitter. Thatcher was dragging his backpack on the concrete sidewalk. They climbed into the back seat. The car instantly filled with the smell of warm crayons, sunscreen, and crushed apple juice boxes. Look, Daddy, Alara said, holding up her wet paper. I painted Grandma's house, but I made the door purple because purple is happy. I looked at the crooked purple door on the paper. My throat felt tight. It is beautiful, Bug, I whispered. Can we have macaroni for dinner? Thatcher asked, kicking the back of my seat softly. Yes, buddy, we sure can. I shifted the car into drive and pulled away from the school. I looked at them in the rearview mirror. They were completely safe in their little world. They had no idea that two strangers in a hotel downtown were trying to tear our life apart just to pay for luxury cars and beach houses in Florida. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was not just a quiet artist anymore. I was the wall standing between my children and the people who abandoned me. The house was completely dark except for the small lamp on my kitchen table. The kids were fast asleep in their rooms. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. I opened my laptop. Beatrix had set up the tracking email. All I had to do was write the message to Uncle Mercer. I stared at the blinking cursor. Mercer used to buy me ice cream when I was 10. He taught me how to tie my shoes when my parents were too busy packing for their Florida move. The betrayal burned deep in my chest. I placed my fingers on the keyboard and began to type. Mercer, I am really scared. I got court papers from Vaughn and Blythe today. I do not have enough money to fight them. I am thinking about secretly taking out a $50,000 loan against Grandma's house tomorrow morning, just to hire a cheap lawyer. Please do not tell my parents. You are the only family I can trust right now. What should I do? I read the words again. It was the perfect bait. It painted me as weak, desperate, and about to touch the house they wanted to sell. I clicked send at 8:34 p.m. I left the laptop open and walked to the sink to wash the macaroni pots. The water ran over my hands, warm and soapy. At 8:41 p.m., my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Mercer. "Callahan, I am so sorry this is happening to you. Do not worry. I will keep this strictly between us. Do not take out a loan yet. Let me look into some options for you tomorrow. Get some rest. I am here for you." It sounded so warm, so incredibly kind. 2 minutes later, at 8:43 p.m., a red notification popped up on my laptop screen. It was an alert from Beatrix's tracking software. Alert. Email forwarded to Blythe@hawthorneinvestmentsfl.com at 8:42:15 p.m. I stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at the glowing red text. Mercer had forwarded my secret to my mother exactly 60 seconds after promising to protect me. I did not cry. The inner pain and grief I expected to feel just wasn't there anymore. Instead, the final string connecting me to that family completely snapped. The dots were connecting. My new team was working. The trap was set, and the enablers had just walked right into it. I closed the laptop with a soft click. The printer in room 402 of the Thorne & Caldwell law firm made a soft, rhythmic humming sound. I sat in the same heavy leather chair, watching the fresh pages fall into the plastic tray. It had been 9 days since I sent the bait email to Uncle Mercer. 9 days of packing Thatcher and Alara's lunchboxes, smiling at school drop-offs, and waiting in absolute silence. Beatrix pulled the warm stack of paper from the printer. She did not smile, but her dark eyes were sharp with focus. She handed the thick document to Mr. Thorne. "They took the bait," Beatrix said quietly. Mr. Thorne put on his reading glasses and flipped to page 12 of the document. It was the official amended petition for emergency custody, filed by my parents' lawyers in Miami just an hour ago. He slid the packet across the mahogany table toward me. He tapped a specific paragraph with his silver pen. My eyes followed the tip of his pen. The legal text was printed in cold black ink. Grounds for emergency custody. The petitioners have received credible direct evidence that the defendant is financially unstable. The defendant has recently communicated intent to illegally secure a $50,000 loan against the deceased Opaline's estate to cover personal debts. I let out a slow, shaking breath. The air in the room felt perfectly still. They had actually done it. They put the lie into a sworn legal document. "By filing this," Mr. Thorne explained, his voice low and steady, "your parents just committed perjury. They swore to a judge that this information is a fact. But we have the digital tracking data. We can prove the $50,000 loan was a complete fiction created by this office. We can also prove your Uncle Mercer is operating as a spy to bypass your legal privacy." "It is a perfect trap," I whispered, staring at my mother's signature on the last page. Her handwriting was elegant, with sharp, sweeping loops. "But it gets worse for them," Beatrix said. She turned her silver laptop so I could see the screen. "You asked me to look into their finances in Florida. You wanted to know why they are suddenly so desperate for your grandmother's estate after ignoring you for 27 years. Beatrix pressed a key, and a spreadsheet appeared. Red numbers filled the columns. "Your parents live in a 6-bedroom mansion in Naples," Beatrix pointed to the screen. "They drive 2 luxury cars. They are members of the Pelican Bay Country Club. But it is all smoke and mirrors, Callahan. Their company, Hawthorne Investments FL, lost a massive commercial real estate deal last year. They have maxed out 5 different corporate credit cards. But here is the ticking clock." She highlighted a single row at the bottom of the screen. "Payment due, November 30, 2025. Amount, $412,000. They took out a high-risk commercial loan and cross-collateralized it with their mansion 3 years ago," Beatrix said softly. "The grace period ends on November 30. If they do not pay $412,000 in cash by that date, their company will be forced into public Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The bank will seize their home and their business. They will publicly lose everything." I sat back in my chair. The heavy leather creaked under my weight. Suddenly, a memory from May 2010 flashed in my mind. It was my high school graduation. The Texas heat was boiling. I was 18, wearing a cheap blue cap and gown. My parents had actually flown in from Florida for the ceremony. I thought, for one foolish day, that they were finally proud of me, but they did not watch me walk across the stage. After the ceremony, Blythe pulled me to the edge of the football field. She fixed my collar, smiled brightly, and made a stranger take a picture of the 3 of us. 10 minutes later, they were in a rental car heading back to the airport. They missed the family dinner Grandma Opaline had cooked. They just needed the photograph. They needed the picture to post online. to show their wealthy Florida friends that they were a perfect, loving family. Image was everything to them. It was their oxygen. And now, their perfect image was about to shatter into a million pieces. They were drowning in debt. They were facing public ruin in their wealthy neighborhood. So, they looked across the country and saw my grandmother's $2 estate. To get the money, they needed control of my children. To them, Thatcher and Alara were not grandchildren. They were simply keys to a bank vault. "The custody hearing is on November 12, Mr. Thorne said, pulling me out of my memory. 18 days before their house goes into foreclosure. They are hoping you will be so terrified of losing your children that you will sign a settlement right there in the hallway, giving them control of the estate." "They think I will fold," I said. My voice did not shake. The old quiet boy they left on the porch was completely gone. In his place was a father who knew exactly how to protect his own. "What do we do now?" Beatrix asked, looking at me. She was not telling me what to do anymore. She was asking for my permission. My team was waiting for my signal. I looked at the legal paper with my mother's elegant signature. "We stay completely silent," I said, looking up at Mr. Thorne. "Let them think they are winning. Let them walk into the courtroom on November 12 expecting a funeral. We will give them exactly what they want." Mr. Thorne smiled. It was not a polite smile. It was the smile of a man who was ready for war. I sat at my drawing desk in the corner of the living room. My digital pen moved slowly across the glowing screen of my drawing tablet. I was finishing a book cover for a local publisher, a painting of a dark forest with a small glowing lantern. The deadline was Monday. The pay was $600. It was not a lot of money, but it was honest money. The house smelled like melted chocolate and cheap plastic. Alara was running around the coffee table wearing a bright yellow bumblebee costume. Thatcher was sitting on the rug, struggling to pull a green dinosaur mask over his head. It was Halloween. For the twins, tonight was the most important night of the year. For me, it was day 17 of the silent waiting game. The doorbell rang. The sharp sound made Alara stop running. "I will get it," Thatcher shouted, finally pulling the green mask over his nose. I put my digital pen down. "Hold on, buddy. Let Daddy check first." I walked to the front door and looked through the small glass window. It was Uncle Mercer. He was wearing a faded polo shirt and holding an orange plastic pumpkin filled with candy. He had a big, friendly smile on his face. I took a deep breath. I felt a cold chill run down my arms. The last time I saw him, he was just my uncle. Now I knew exactly what he was. He was the spy. He was the man feeding my children's future to my parents. I unlocked the door and opened it. "Happy Halloween," Mercer said loudly, shaking the plastic pumpkin. "I brought some treats for the monsters." "Uncle Mercer," Alara cheered, running to the door. She reached into the pumpkin and pulled out a chocolate bar. "Thank you, Mercer," I said quietly. I kept my voice perfectly flat. I opened the door wider. "Come inside. We are just getting ready to go trick-or-treating." Mercer walked into the living room. He looked around carefully. His eyes scanned the drawing tablet, the old sofa, and the stack of mail on the kitchen counter. He was not looking at the house. He was looking at the asset. "So," Mercer said, lowering his voice as the kids ran back to the rug. He put his hands in his pockets. He would not look me directly in the eye. "How are you holding up, Callahan? Any more news from Vaughn and Blythe?" I looked at him. I noticed how he rubbed the back of his neck when he asked the question. I noticed how his friendly smile did not reach his eyes. "It is bad, Mercer," I lied, letting my shoulders drop to make myself look tired. "I got the official court papers last week. They are really coming for the kids. I feel like I am drowning. I don't know how I am going to pay for a lawyer." Mercer nodded slowly. His face shifted into a look of deep, fake sympathy. "I am so sorry, Callahan. I really am. You know, maybe fighting them in court is a bad idea. Your parents have a lot of money. The legal fees will destroy you." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Maybe," Mercer said softly. "You should just talk to them. Maybe you can sign over the estate management to Vaughn. If you give them control of Opaline's money, they will probably drop the custody case. You get to keep the twins, and they get to handle the stress of the finances. It is a win-win." My chest tightened. A win-win. He was actually trying to convince me to hand over the $2,800,000. He was doing their dirty work right in my living room, while my children played at his feet. "I don't know," I whispered, looking down at the floor. "I just need this to be over." "It will be," Mercer said. He patted my shoulder. His hand felt heavy and cold. "Just think about it, for the kids." He left 10 minutes later, leaving a pile of cheap candy on the kitchen counter. I locked the door behind him. I stood in the quiet hallway, letting the mask of the weak, scared nephew slowly fade away. I walked back to my desk, picked up my phone, and called Beatrix. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, Callahan. Mercer was just here," I said, my voice low. "He pushed me to surrender the estate to Vaughn. He wants me to settle before the hearing. Why is he pushing so hard? What is his exact cut?" I heard the sound of a keyboard typing on Beatrix's end. "I found the missing puzzle piece an hour ago," Beatrix said. "Your uncle's real estate agency has been failing for 2 years. In March 2022, Vaughn gave Mercer a private business loan of $250,000 to keep the doors open. Mercer never paid it back. As collateral, Vaughn holds 51% of the majority shares in Mercer's agency. If Vaughn's company goes into Chapter 11 bankruptcy next month, he is going to call in Mercer's debt. He will force Mercer into bankruptcy and seize his entire life's work." The truth clicked into place perfectly. Mercer was not just helping them for a commission. He was helping them because Vaughn had a chain around his neck. My parents used money to control everyone around them. They bought loyalty. They bought silence. "Mercer is a drowning man," I said quietly, looking at Alara in her bumblebee costume. "And Vaughn told him the only way to survive is to hold my head under the water." "Exactly," Beatrix said. "Mercer is trapped. He is a victim of their manipulation too. But that does not excuse what he is doing to you." "No," I said, my voice turning to ice. "It does not." I hung up the phone. I looked at the orange plastic pumpkin on the counter. My new team had found the secret. The dots were fully connected. I knew their timeline. I knew their debts. I knew exactly how their toxic machine worked. I picked up the dinosaur mask from the floor and handed it to Thatcher. "Come on, buddy," I said, giving him a real warm smile. "Let's go get some candy." For the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the dark. The Thorne and Caldwell law firm was completely empty on the weekend. The heavy glass doors were locked, but Mr. Thorne had given me a temporary keycard. The quiet hallways smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. I walked down the hall to room 402. The grandfather clock was still ticking, slow and steady. Inside the room, Beatrix and Mr. Thorne were already waiting. The mahogany table was covered in neat stacks of paper, colored sticky notes, and 3 thick black binders. "Good morning, Callahan," Mr. Thorne said. He was wearing a casual gray sweater today, but his eyes were just as sharp as always. He pointed to a chair. "Take a seat. We have 4 days until the hearing. It is time to build your armor." I sat down. The leather chair felt familiar now. I looked at the black binder in front of me. On the cover, a white label read, "Estate of Opaline versus Vaughn and Blythe." "This is not just a court case anymore," Beatrix said softly. She opened her silver laptop. "This is a rescue mission, and you are the one leading it." I opened the heavy black binder. The first page was a copy of my parents' emergency custody petition, the paper that called me an unstable poor father. A few weeks ago, looking at this paper made me feel sick and small. Today it just looked like a bad drawing, a picture filled with mistakes. "In my job," I said quietly, running my finger over the printed words, "when I draw a book cover, I have to map out the light and the shadows. If the light is coming from the wrong direction, the whole picture feels fake. The human eye knows it is a lie, even if they cannot explain why." I looked up at Mr. Thorne. "My parents drew a fake picture of me. They painted me as a desperate man asking Uncle Mercer for a secret $50,000 loan. But they forgot about the light. They forgot to check if their own shadows were clean." Mr. Thorne smiled. It was a proud, quiet smile. "Exactly. And on Tuesday, we are going to show the judge their shadows." Beatrice leaned forward, handing me a blue folder. "This is the final financial report on Hawthorne Investments FL. I received the certified bank records from Miami yesterday. It is worse than we thought. Vaughn and Blythe are completely out of cash. Their credit score is destroyed. The $412,000 balloon payment for their Florida mansion is due on November 30. They have exactly 22 days before the bank takes their home and locks the doors." She handed me a second piece of paper. It was the private loan agreement between Vaughn and Uncle Mercer from 2022. "And here is the chain around your uncle's neck," Beatrice continued. "A $250,000 loan that Mercer never paid back. Vaughn legally owns majority shares in Mercer's real estate business until that money is returned. That is why Mercer became their spy. He is just trying to save his own sinking ship." I stared at the papers. For 27 years I thought my parents left me because I was not good enough. I thought I was broken. But looking at these cold, hard numbers, the heavy weight in my chest finally lifted. They did not leave me because of who I was. They left me because they only cared about things that looked shiny on the outside. They were empty people, chasing empty money. They are going to walk into the courtroom on Tuesday, Mr. Thorne said, tapping his silver pen on the table. They will wear expensive suits. They will smile at the judge. They will try to look like the perfect loving grandparents stepping in to save two poor children. Your mother might even cry. She will use polite, gentle words to call you a failure. I know, I whispered. Your job, Mr. Thorne leaned closer, his voice dropping to a serious whisper, is to do absolutely nothing. You will sit next to me. You will not argue. You will not shake your head. You will not show anger. If you show anger, you prove their point. You must be completely made of ice. Let them tell their story, Beatrix added, her dark eyes locking onto mine. Let them present the fake $50,000 loan to the judge. The moment they swear under oath that the loan is real, the trap snaps shut. We will introduce the digital tracking data. We will introduce the commercial bankruptcy documents. We will show the judge that this is not a custody battle. It is a bank robbery. I closed the black binder. The loud smack of the cardboard echoed in the quiet room. And what about Clause 4B? I asked. Grandma Opaline's defensive poison pill. The moment the judge sees the truth, Mr. Thorne said, I will formally activate the clause on the court record. The $2,800,000 will be frozen and transferred to a corporate bank. Your parents will not be able to touch a single penny, and they will still have to face their $412,000 debt in Florida alone. I nodded slowly. I thought about Alara painting the purple door on Grandma's house. I thought about Thatcher wearing his green dinosaur mask. I was their father. It was my job to keep the monsters away. I am ready, I said. Mr. Thorne stood up and buttoned his suit jacket. Good. Go home, Callahan. Rest this weekend. Hug your kids, because on Tuesday morning we are going to burn their perfect image to the ground. The Travis County Courthouse was a massive block of gray stone that looked like a fortress. The morning air was cold, and a sharp wind blew dead leaves across the wide concrete steps. I stood near the heavy brass doors, waiting. I wore a simple dark blue suit. It was not expensive, but it was clean and pressed. I checked my phone. Alara and Thatcher were safely dropped off at school. Their lunchboxes were packed. Everything was perfectly normal for them. Ready, Callahan? Mr. Thorne appeared beside me. He carried his thick brown briefcase. Beatrice walked closely behind him, her silver laptop bag slung over her shoulder. They did not look nervous. They looked like they were going to work. I'm ready, I said. We walked through the metal detectors and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Family court. The hallway outside room 4112 was long, narrow, and lined with hard wooden benches. They were already there. Vaughn was pacing near the water fountain. He wore a sharp, charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my car. His thick silver watch flashed under the bright fluorescent lights. Blythe was sitting on a wooden bench. She wore a tailored black dress and a string of pearls. They both looked up when I stepped out of the elevator. Blythe immediately stood up and walked toward me. Her face was set in a mask of gentle, polite concern. The perfect, loving mother. Callahan, sweetie, she said softly, reaching out to touch my arm. I stepped back, just enough to avoid her hand. Her smile flickered for a second, then returned. You do not have to do this. We can talk right here in the hallway. Vaughn has the settlement papers. Just let us manage Opaline's estate, and we will drop the custody petition right now. We don't want to hurt you in there. She spoke with such gentle subtext. She sounded so reasonable. The polite cruelty was perfect. She was giving me one last chance to surrender before the execution. Mr. Thorne stepped smoothly between us. Mrs. Hawthorne, any settlement offers must be directed to me as his legal counsel. However, my client politely declines. Vaughn stopped pacing. He walked over, his eyes hard and cold. You are making a massive mistake, Callahan. You are out of your depth. The judge is going to look at your income, look at your wife's medical debt, and look at your attempt to secretly mortgage Opaline's house. You will lose the twins today. He said it quietly. A quiet, calculated threat meant to shatter my confidence right before we walked through the doors. I looked at my father. I saw the tiny beads of sweat on his forehead. I saw how tightly his hands gripped the edge of his suit jacket. He was terrified. He was 22 days away from losing his mansion in Florida, and he was projecting all of his fear onto me. We will see, I said softly. The heavy oak doors of room 412 opened. A bailiff in a brown uniform leaned out. Case number 24 FC 890, Hawthorne versus Hawthorne. Honorable Judge Cresswell presiding. Please step inside. My chest tightened for a fraction of a second. I took a slow breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. I walked into the courtroom, Mr. Thorne and Beatrix at my side. The courtroom was quiet, smelling of old wood and lemon polish. Judge Cresswell was a stern-looking woman with gray hair pulled back into a tight bun. She sat high above us at the wooden bench, reading a file through thick glasses. We sat at the defendant's table. Vaughn and Blythe sat at the petitioner's table across the aisle with their expensive, slick-haired lawyer. "All right," Judge Cresswell said, her voice echoing in the large room. She did not look up from the file. "This is an emergency petition for temporary custody of 2 minors. The petitioners are the biological grandparents, claiming the father is financially unstable and poses an immediate risk to the children's well-being and their inheritance. Let's keep this brief. Petitioner, present your grounds for emergency intervention." Vaughn's lawyer stood up. He buttoned his jacket and walked smoothly to the center of the room. He spoke with a loud, confident voice. "Your Honor," Mr. Graves began, pointing a finger toward me, "my clients are here with broken hearts. They are stepping in to save their grandchildren from a chaotic and unstable environment. We have documented proof that the defendant, Callahan Hawthorne, operates a low-income freelance business. He struggles with past medical debt. And most importantly, we have a sworn statement confirming he is actively attempting to secretly extract a $50,000 loan against his late grandmother's estate to cover personal debts, jeopardizing the children's future inheritance." He paused, letting the silence hang. He turned and looked at Blythe with deep, fake sympathy. "My clients simply want to place the estate into a secure trust under their experienced management," the lawyer concluded, "and provide the children with the stable, wealthy home they deserve in Florida. We ask the court to grant immediate temporary custody." Judge Cresswell finally looked up. She turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were sharp and tired. "Mr. Hawthorne, your counsel may respond. Is it true your client is attempting to secure a secret loan against the estate property?" Mr. Thorne stood up slowly. He picked up the heavy black binder from our table. He did not yell. He did not sound dramatic. He sounded like a man reading the weather report. "No, Your Honor, it is not true," Mr. Thorne said calmly. "In fact, the $50,000 loan does not exist. It was a digital trap created by this law firm, and the petitioners walked right into it. The sworn statement they just submitted to this court is perjury." The air in the courtroom seemed to stop moving. Vaughn's slick lawyer blinked, his confident smile freezing on his face. "Mr. Thorne opened the black binder. The confrontation had begun. "Explain yourself, Mr. Thorne," Judge Cresswell said. Her voice dropped to a dangerous, quiet tone. She took off her thick glasses and stared down at our table. Mr. Thorne pulled a single, crisp piece of paper from the heavy black binder. The court bailiff walked over, took the paper, and handed it up to the judge. "On the evening of October 14, Mr. Thorne said, walking slowly toward the center of the room, we instructed my client to send a private message to his uncle Mercer Dane. The message contained a completely made-up story about a $50,000 loan. We attached a hidden digital tracking code to that message. Your Honor, the document in your hands shows the exact second Mercer Dane forwarded our fake story directly to Blythe Hawthorne's business email." I watched my mother's hands across the aisle. She was sitting perfectly straight, but her fingers were gripping her small black leather purse so tightly that her knuckles looked like white marbles. "Objection," Vaughn's lawyer shouted, jumping up from his chair. His smooth, confident voice suddenly cracked. "Your Honor, this is a clear invasion of privacy. This is a legal trick." Judge Cresswell did not shout. She just raised one hand and held her palm flat in the air. "Sit down, Mr. Graves," she commanded. "You just stood in my courtroom and presented this fake loan as a sworn verified fact to steal 2 children from their father. Do not talk to me about tricks." The expensive lawyer slowly sat down. He began shuffling his papers, looking frantically at Vaughn. "Why?" Judge Cresswell asked, looking directly at Mr. Thorne. "Why would the grandparents manufacture a lie to gain emergency custody?" "Because they are out of time, Your Honor," Mr. Thorne said smoothly. He reached back, and Beatrice handed him the blue folder. The bailiff carried it up to the judge. "The petitioners are not here to save their grandchildren. They are here to rob them." I looked at my father. He was staring at the blue folder in the judge's hands. He swallowed hard. The thick silver watch on his wrist suddenly looked entirely out of place, like a heavy anchor pulling him underwater. "Inside that folder are certified financial records from Miami," Mr. Thorne continued, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "Vaughn and Blythe Hawthorne are facing a $412,000 balloon mortgage payment on their Florida home. The absolute deadline is November 30. That is exactly 18 days from now, They are completely bankrupt. They filed this emergency petition because they need legal control of Opaline's $2.8 million estate to save their country club lifestyle. The courtroom was dead silent. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning vents overhead. Blythe suddenly stood up. Her mask of the perfect caring grandmother slipped just a little. Her polite smile turned sharp, tight, and desperate. "Your Honor," Blythe said. Her voice was shaking slightly, but it was still dripping with that soft, polite tone she always used to make me feel small. "This is ridiculous. Callahan is clearly unwell. He is grieving his grandmother, and he is making up these awful, wild stories. We are successful business owners. We just want to help our son. He lives in a tiny, cramped house. He draws cartoons for a living. We can give Thatcher and Alara a real future." Judge Cresswell slowly flipped through the certified bank records. She did not look up at Blythe. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Judge Cresswell said quietly, her eyes scanning the red numbers on the paper. "I am looking at a final notice of foreclosure with your personal signature on it. Are you telling me the Bank of Miami is making up wild stories too?" Blythe froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked at Vaughn. Vaughn looked down at the scratched wooden table. I sat in my chair, perfectly still. My hands were resting flat on my knees. For 27 years I thought my parents were giant, untouchable figures. I thought their wealth and their perfect clothes meant they were better than me. But sitting in this cold courtroom, watching them squirm under the bright lights, I finally saw the truth. They were not giants. They were just empty people. They had built a whole life out of fake smiles and borrowed money, and now the wind was blowing it all away. "And there is one more thing, Your Honor," Mr. Thorne said, pulling the final document from our binder. "The spy they used to gather inside information on my client? Uncle Mercer. He only helped them because Vaughn Hawthorne holds a $250,000 private loan over his head. They forced a family member to betray my client under the direct threat of bankruptcy." Judge Cresswell closed the blue folder. The loud smack of the cardboard echoed off the stone walls. Mr. Graves, Vaughn's expensive lawyer, stared at the tracking data and the bankruptcy warning on the judge's desk. His face went completely pale. He realized his clients had tricked him into submitting a fraudulent financial affidavit to the court. Mr. Graves did not even wait for the judge to speak. He immediately began tossing his shiny pens and legal pads into his expensive leather briefcase. The metal zipper made a loud, sharp noise in the quiet courtroom. "Petition withdrawn, Your Honor," Mr. Graves said quickly. He did not look at Vaughn or Blythe. He looked like a man trying to jump off a sinking ship. "We withdraw the motion for emergency custody entirely." Vaughn grabbed his lawyer's sleeve. "What are you doing?" he hissed, his voice finally losing its smooth, practiced edge. "You cannot just quit. We need that estate." "I am saving my law license, Mr. Hawthorne," Graves whispered harshly, pulling his arm away. "You lied to me. You gave me fraudulent documents. You are completely bankrupt. We are done." Judge Cresswell picked up her wooden gavel. "The emergency petition for custody is officially dismissed with prejudice. That means it cannot be filed again. But before I close this hearing, Mr. Hawthorne," she looked over at my table, "does the defense have anything to add for the official court record?" Mr. Thorne stood up. He did not smile, but I could feel the quiet victory radiating from him. "Yes, Your Honor," Mr. Thorne said. "We are officially submitting a notice of activation for Clause 4B of the Opaline Estate Trust, the defensive poison pill." Blythe stopped breathing. She stared at Mr. Thorne, her polite mask completely shattered. Her face was pale, tight, and suddenly looked very old. "Because the petitioners filed a formal lawsuit against the primary beneficiary," Mr. Thorne explained, ensuring every single word was recorded by the court reporter. "The trust's security protocol is now active. The entire $2.8 million estate is instantly frozen and transferred to an independent corporate bank. No one, not even my client, can withdraw a large sum. Furthermore, a $300,000 defense fund has just been released to our law firm to fight any future legal harassment." Vaughn's jaw dropped. The heavy silence in the room returned, but this time it was suffocating them. They had played their final card, and Grandma Opaline, from beyond the grave, had just flipped the game board completely upside down. Vaughn and Blythe were not just walking away empty-handed. They were walking away to face a $412,000 bank foreclosure in exactly 18 days, with absolutely zero cash to stop it. They were going to lose the mansion. They were going to lose the country club. Their wealthy friends in Florida were going to watch them pack their bags and move into a cheap apartment. "You planned this," Blythe whispered, turning her whole body to look at me. Her eyes were wide and filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure panic. "Callahan," Sweetie, please, you cannot let them lock the money away. We are your parents. We made a tiny mistake today, yes, but we can fix this. You have to tell the judge to stop the clause. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. I remembered standing on the wooden porch in Houston in 1998, holding a small brown suitcase, watching her red car drive away. I remembered waiting by the front window for 3 days, thinking she was coming back. I did not feel angry anymore. I just felt completely empty toward her. I cannot stop the clause, I said softly, my voice steady and clear. And even if I could, I wouldn't. Callahan, we will lose our home. Vaughn suddenly shouted, slamming his hand flat on the wooden table. The loud smack echoed sharply off the stone walls. His face was bright red, and sweat dripped down his neck. You owe us. We gave you life. You are nothing but a poor cartoonist sitting in a tiny house. You need us. Judge Cresswell hit her gavel hard. Bang. One more outburst like that, Mr. Hawthorne, and you will spend the night in the county jail for contempt. Judge Cresswell warned, her voice like ice. Your son owes you absolutely nothing. You abandoned him. You tried to steal his children using fraudulent documents. You are completely disgraced. Bailiff, escort the petitioners out of my courtroom. The court bailiff, a tall man in a brown uniform, walked toward Vaughn and Blythe. He pointed his finger toward the heavy oak doors. Blythe tried to reach across the aisle toward me. Her hand was shaking. Callahan, please. I turned my body away from her. I looked at Mr. Thorne and Beatrix. I nodded. We began to pack our papers into the black binder. I did not watch my parents walk out the door. I just listened to the heavy thud of their expensive shoes on the carpet, followed by the loud click of the courtroom doors closing behind them forever. It was over. The heavy weight that I had carried in my chest for 27 years evaporated into the cold air. You did very well, Callahan, Beatrix said, zipping her silver laptop bag. She gave me a real warm smile. Let's go home, Mr. Thorne said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. We walked out of the courtroom together. The hallway was entirely empty. There was no one waiting to attack me. There was no one hiding in the shadows. I walked to the large glass windows at the end of the hall and looked out over the city of Austin. The sun was shining brightly, hitting the tall buildings and warming the busy streets below. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a daily reminder I had set for myself. 11:30 a.m. Buy Alara's favorite apple juice. I smiled. A real deep smile. The sky over Austin was a deep, heavy gray. A cool autumn rain was starting to fall, tapping softly against the kitchen window. I stood by the stove, watching the water boil in a small metal pot. I opened a box of macaroni and cheese, the exact brand Thatcher loved, and poured the small yellow noodles into the bubbling water. The house was incredibly peaceful. The TV in the living room was playing a cartoon, and I could hear Alara and Thatcher laughing at a funny dog on the screen. It had been 48 hours since we walked out of the Travis County Courthouse. Mr. Thorne had called me yesterday morning to confirm that the legal lock on Grandma Opaline's estate was fully active. The $2,800,000 was safely hidden inside the corporate trust for the next 10 years. The wall around my family was built, and the gate was firmly locked. The doorbell rang. The sharp sound cut through the quiet house. A few weeks ago, that sound would have made my heart race. It would have made my hands shake with fear. Today, my hands were perfectly steady. I turned the heat down on the stove, wiped my hands on a blue dish towel, and walked to the front door. I looked through the small glass window. It was Uncle Mercer. He did not look like the friendly, smiling real estate agent who brought cheap Halloween candy to my house 2 weeks ago. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. His hair was messy, and his faded blue polo shirt was wrinkled. He was standing in the light rain, shivering slightly, looking down at his brown shoes. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. I did not step back to let him in. I stood right in the doorway, blocking the entrance. Mercer looked up. His eyes were red, and the skin around his mouth was pale and tight. He forced a small, weak smile. It was the same polite mask my mother used, but it was cracking. "Callahan," Mercer said, his voice shaking. "It is raining. Can I come inside for a minute?" "No," I said quietly. My voice was completely flat. "We can talk right here." Mercer blinked. He looked at the warm light coming from my living room, then back at me. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he had whenever he was trapped. "Vaughn called me yesterday," Mercer began. He spoke fast, his words stumbling over each other. "He told me what happened in court. He is furious, Callahan. He lost the case and now he is completely out of cash. The bank is going to take his mansion in Florida, and because he is drowning, he is pulling me down with him. He officially called in my $250,000 business loan this morning. I looked at him. I did not say a word. I just let the cool rain fall between us. I don't have the money, Mercer whispered. A single tear mixed with the rain on his cheek. My real estate agency is completely empty. If I don't pay Vaughn by next week, he is going to take my business. I will have to file for bankruptcy. I will lose everything I have built. He reached out and placed his hand on the wooden doorframe, leaning closer. Callahan, please, Mercer begged, his voice cracking into a soft sob. I am your uncle. I taught you how to ride a bike. I brought you food when Opaline died. You have a huge legal defense fund now. Ask Mr. Thorne to give me a small loan. Just $250,000. It is nothing to you. You can save me. I stared at his hand on the doorframe. Then I looked directly into his red, panicked eyes. You brought me food, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, so you could look inside my house and count my things. You smiled at my children while you were helping two strangers build a cage for them. You traded my family's safety to pay your own debts. Mercer shook his head quickly. I had no choice. Vaughn forced me. You know how he is. He controls people with money. I was scared, Callahan. I just wanted to survive. So you decided to drown me instead, I replied calmly. The absolute silence from me made him freeze. I was not yelling. I was not angry. I was simply looking at a man who had sold his own nephew for a real estate commission. In 1998, when they left me on that porch, I said, pointing a finger out toward the rainy street, you did not stop them. When I was eating plain bread for dinner because Grandma Opaline was broke, you did not offer to help. You have always watched them hurt me, and you just smiled and stayed quiet. You are exactly like them, Mercer. You just wear a cheaper suit. Mercer took his hand off the doorframe. He took a slow step backward into the rain. The fake friendly uncle he had played for 27 years completely disappeared, leaving behind a very small, very cowardly man. You are really going to let me lose my business? Mercer asked. His voice was hollow. I am not letting you do anything, I said quietly. You made a bad deal with bad people. Now you have to pay the bill. I stepped back inside the house. Goodbye, Mercer. I pushed the heavy front door closed. The lock clicked into place with a loud, satisfying snap. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to the rain hit the roof. The silence in the house wrapped around me like a warm blanket. For the first time in my entire life, my house was completely free of their shadows. I had finally cut the last string. I was not the quiet, sad little boy waiting on the porch anymore. I was the master of my own home. Daddy, the macaroni is bubbling, Alara called out from the living room. I smiled. A real, deep smile that reached all the way to my eyes. I am coming, Bug, I called back. I walked into the bright, warm kitchen. I stirred the yellow noodles, drained the hot water, and poured the cheese powder into the pot. The smell of warm milk and cheese filled the air. I poured the food into 2 small green plastic bowls. I carried the bowls into the living room. Thatcher and Alara were sitting on the soft rug, surrounded by colored blocks and toy cars. They looked up at me with bright, happy eyes. I sat down on the floor right next to them. They did not care about mansions in Florida. They did not care about country clubs or bank accounts. They just cared that I was here, sitting on the floor, handing them their favorite green bowls. We ate our dinner together while the rain washed the streets of Austin completely clean. Spring arrived in Austin with a sudden burst of warm wind and thick green leaves. The heavy dark clouds of winter were completely gone. I stood in the front yard of Grandma Opaline's old house on Elm Street, holding a paint roller dripping with bright, wet paint. Alara was sitting on the grass, wearing her tiny denim overalls, watching me carefully. Is it purple enough, Daddy? She asked, pointing a small finger at the front door. I stepped back and looked at the wet wood. I think it is the perfect purple, Bug, I smiled. Exactly like the picture you drew. We had moved into Opaline's house in February. Because the $2,800,000 estate was legally locked for 10 years under Clause 4B, I could not sell the property or take out any large cash sums. But the trust allowed my family to live in the house rent-free, and it provided a small, strict monthly allowance of $1,200 for property taxes and the children's basic school needs. It was not a life of luxury. I still had to wake up at 5 a.m. every single day to draw magazine covers and children's books just to pay for our groceries and electricity. But I did not care about luxury. I cared about peace. And this house, with its quiet rooms and large oak trees, was the most peaceful place on earth. I placed the paint roller in a plastic tray and walked over to the silver mailbox at the end of the driveway. Inside was a thick brown envelope. The return address read, Thorne and Caldwell Law Firm, Room 402. I walked to the wooden porch steps and sat down in the afternoon sun. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short typed letter from Mr. Silas Thorne, along with a printed page from a Florida real estate website. Dear Callahan, I hope the spring weather is treating you and the twins well. I like to keep my files perfectly clean and closed, so I am sending you the final update regarding your parents' financial situation. As we predicted, they failed to make the $412,000 balloon payment on November 30. The Bank of Miami officially foreclosed on their property. I pulled out the printed page from the real estate website. There was a bright, professional photograph of the giant 6-bedroom mansion in Naples, Florida. Stamped across the beautiful picture in bold red letters was one word: auctioned. The property sold to a corporate buyer in January 2026. I kept reading Mr. Thorne's letter. Vaughn and Blythe Hawthorne's investment company filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 2 weeks later. Without the estate money to save them, they lost their country club memberships, their luxury vehicles, and their social standing. My investigators confirm they are currently renting a 2-bedroom apartment near the Tampa Highway. Additionally, Mercer Dane's real estate agency in Austin formally closed its doors in February. His broker's license was suspended due to his inability to pay his debts. The legal shield your grandmother built worked perfectly. They have no money, no power, and no legal right to ever contact you or your children again. The boundary is permanently set. Live your life, Callahan. You earned it. Best regards, Silas Thorne. I folded the letter slowly. I ran my thumb over the crisp edge of the paper. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind rustling through the tall green trees. I thought I would feel a sense of victory. I thought I would want to celebrate their fall. But sitting on the porch, feeling the warm Texas sun on my face, I realized I did not care about them at all. The heavy grief, the silent pain of being the abandoned child, was completely gone. They built their whole world on lies and fake smiles. They worshipped money instead of loyalty. When the money ran out, they had absolutely nothing left. Their punishment was not a dramatic police raid or a jail cell. Their punishment was simply having to wake up every single morning and live the small, quiet, poor life they used to mock me for. They were finally strangers. "Daddy, look!" Thatcher yelled, running out of the house, letting the screen door slam behind him. He was holding a brand new comic book I had drawn for a local publisher. His eyes were wide with pure joy. "My friends at school are going to think you are a superhero." I laughed, a deep, full sound that echoed across the quiet street. I pulled him into a tight hug. "I am just a guy who draws pictures, buddy." "No," Alara said seriously, walking up the wooden steps and sitting right next to me. She leaned her small head against my arm. "You are the best drawer in the whole world." I wrapped my arms around both of them. This was my real inheritance, not the $2,800,000 locked in a bank vault, not the legal defense fund. My inheritance was the armor Grandma Opaline gave me to protect my true family. She taught me that blood just means you are related, but loyalty means you are family. The Austin Memorial Cemetery was completely silent except for the gentle sound of the morning wind. The grass was bright green and covered in small white flowers. I walked down the narrow stone path, holding 2 small paper cups of hot vanilla tea. Thatcher and Alara walked quietly beside me. They were holding hands. We stopped in front of a flat gray stone marker. Opaline Grace Hawthorne, 1941, 2025. A mother, a grandmother, a guardian. I knelt down on the soft grass and placed one of the paper cups on the edge of her stone. The steam rose into the cool morning air, carrying the sweet smell of vanilla. "We brought your tea, Grandma," I whispered. I did not need to say anything else. I knew she was watching. I knew she saw the purple door. I knew she saw the full lunchboxes, the safe children, and the peaceful house. She knew that the quiet, frightened little boy she took in 27 years ago had finally stood up to the monsters, and he had won. "Thank you," I said softly, touching the cold stone with my fingertips. "Thank you for the armor." Alara stepped forward and placed a small yellow dandelion right next to the teacup. "We love you, Grandma," she said. I stood up, holding my own cup of tea. I took a slow sip. It was warm and sweet. I looked at my son and my daughter. They were smiling, safe in a world that could not be touched by the toxic people of the past. The shadows were gone. The game was over. The boundary was perfectly drawn in permanent ink. I took Alara's small hand in my left hand and Thatcher's hand in my right. We turned around and walked together down the quiet stone path, heading back home to our brightly painted purple door. If this found you fighting a toxic past, share it with someone building their own peace, and go hug the true family who kept you safe from harm. Drop a comment below. I read everyone. Hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next